Okay, so good morning once again. Remember we started looking at developing this particular application, which we refer to as e-commerce application, an application that helps users to buy products directly from our website pages or website page. So in our last class, we have already settled the HTML structure. So you can see, so we have about, I could remember we added images, though I transferred the file. That was why there was a little bit delay. So let me see if I know we added the picture. We added picture, so I need to, let me quickly add picture. Added picture to the code. But I copy the picture. So let me just, if I can quickly add some pictures. Image. Add another product. Let's start working with this. So I told us that you add the image before the product name, img. That's one. I would like to give all the images the same class so that I can talk to them as once. In img one, so come here and add another image tag. Image two, add a class again, class say img2. Right, so let's check the front end if we have pictures display. Okay, so I've not saved the file. So let me set my saving to automatic. Okay, so we have the product. So like I told us in that section that we are actually using 3 different languages to achieve this. The HTML defines the structure of the products, that is, add the products and the necessary button, the prices, and then CSS is to give us a proper presentation. So let's quickly look at the CSS aspects. So I'm going to work with external CSS, which means that I need to also make a folder, name it CSS. I'll go into the folder as usual and create the file. So let's say the file is so we'll make a file inside the CSS folder. Let's call it style.css. And then we have to link it. We have to link it with the HTML structure as usual. So I have to go to the head section and link. and then reference the CSS file. So with that, we have successfully connected the CSS file to the application structure document. So let's go into the CSS aspects and begin to talk to the elements one after the other. So remember I told us that when you are communicating your CSS, you need to understand your HTML structure. So what is our HTML structure? So if you go back to it, you discover that looking at our code structure, we have this heading explaining the store. Then we have the first div holding all the products. Then we have individual div holding the product detail. That is the image, the name of the product, the price, and the button to add to cart, in case the user wants to buy the product. So after studying the structure, we would like to talk to the entire body, because the whole of this, they are wrapped in this body tag. So I want to quickly talk to this. Remember some time ago, I told us that by default, your browser has a style for your elements. So you can see currently there is no space. There's no padding space. So I can decide to say, I want the body style. So let me use this. Styling the body. To styling the body, remember we can only have one body in HTML document, which means there's no point of us classing it. So I'll just call body, and then what do I want there? Remember I told us that whatever we are giving to the body tag is assumed to be the parent element. So if there is any child that do not have his own personal style, will automatically take the properties of the parent. So we are just programming that should there be any text that does not have its own specific style, it should pick the style of the parent. And then we are also programming that should there be any element that does not have padding, so the entire body should there should be padding. Remember we spoke about padding, that padding is the internal space between the contents and the frame around it. So let's check the front end and see the impact of, so you can see the distance that we have created. Initially, all these, they were like, touching this particular edge. Now there's a little allowance between. So that is what talking to the body does. So let's quickly look at another element. Let's look at another element, and the next element, let's always go back to our HTML to understand. So the next element I want to talk to is the div with the class products. So like I advised us before now, let us copy to avoid typographical error. Let us enter copy to avoid. So we are talking to the container that is holding all the products. So I'll go to my CSS again. And then from here, so I'm talking to the products container. You must have a way of understanding what you are doing. So it's a class element. So I'll put dot before I paste it. Open my CSS declaration block. So what do I want? All the elements inside it. All the elements inside these products. Remember, I've spoken about it some time ago. Look at it here. All the elements inside this container. This is a container that is holding other container. So which means that I want to display them in such a way that they will be placed, the content inside this individual container that are inside the main container called products should be placed in line, not block. Because right now, if you check the front end, you will notice that they are displaying block. Each one is taking separate what? Line. But what I want to achieve here is I want this one to be placed by the side. So we are only doing this to ensure a good user interface. So we are going to use the display function, display property display, and they will simply say flex. So if we go back to the front end, you see that we have been able to place them side by side. I hope you are following. Let me get a response.
Yes, sir.
Okay. So the next thing is that I want some gap between them because they are two close to each other. So there's a property which I told us that not quite long that was introduced called gap. So you can use this gap and define the gap. Since they are just two, I can just put like 30 and see how it look like. So I may still, let me leave it like in case I want to add other products. So now the next thing is for me to go back to my HTML and start talking to the div with the class name products. Div with the class name product. So which means we are talking to the containers holding the image, the product name, the price, and the button for adding it to cart. So I'll copy also to avoid typographical error, that is Ctrl+C. Then I will indicate in my with comment styling products individual container. So it's a class element. I have to put dot first before I open my declaration block. So what do I want here? I want some border around those products to make them stand out. So I will just say what? Border. I will just say border. So I'll specify the border line thickness to be 1 ps, specify the border line type to be solid. These are part of what we have done before. Then the color will be, the color should be, I'm using hexadecimal. Let's say this, right? So let me preview it. So I just want, very faint color like this to just box them to make them what stand out from each other. It's your choice. You can decide not to put it. So I also want some padding space between the padding space. Sorry, just a minute. Confirm if you can hear me. Can you hear me? Hello? Are you still here?
I can hear you, sir.
Okay. Sorry. So I was talking about padding. I want some space between on the inside because they are all inside the content inside that container. I want to create some internal space called padding. So I wouldn't want it to be too much. Let me just say 15 PS. And then, like I advised before now, as a beginner, when you are coding like this, you have to make sure that at the end of using each property, you go and check the appearance. So you can see that initially, this particular button was touching this line. When the moment I added the padding, you can see that it stands out. So we're only trying to make sure that we have a very good user application. Then I also want to add some width to it. I also want to add some width to it. I want to add width of, let me try 150. We can always modify if it doesn't give us what we are looking for. So you can see that based on the size of the image, that width is too small. So let me put it at maybe 350 PS and check again. Okay, I think, or should I try 300? You can actually choose your width as you want. Provider is giving you, okay, let me stay on to 300 rather. So I also want test alignment. I want those items inside this container to move to the middle. Is also a choice. All these are not fixed depending on how you want your application to look like. So we are just using this sample to train you. As you can see that all the items are now at the center of the container. So you now compare and contrast. So which one, when they were at the left-hand side, and now that they are at the middle, which one gives you a better presentation? So these are the things you compare. So let me take it back. So I will temporarily comment this out just to look at how the other one look. I think I prefer this. I prefer this because when I moved it to the center, it's as if I was having too many opening spaces. So I'll prefer them still this left alignment. So now we want to go back to the structure and look at the next element. We want to talk to this button, which is the button for choosing the item to purchase. So we want to talk to that. And what is the class name? We did not class. Yes, we class, but we might use this for another purpose. So it's either I use the class name to speak to it, or I use the button tag itself, the tag name. So remember, these are options I told us that are possible. So I want to styling the button, styling the button. So I'm using the tag name, so it does not require dots because it's not a class element, neither an ID element. So I just want that button to look, good, so that it will have a way of, attracting users that visit this website to click. So the first thing is, let's enhance it with some background color. Background color, I'll use green. You can change all these depending on. So let me check. Okay. I'll use green. Then the next one is color of the text. The color of the text, I would like it to be white. All these are subjected to changes. You can change them. It's not compulsory to follow, but it's just that you have to use the format to train you. So border around that button, I don't want the border, so I will just turn on the border and simply say what? None. I just want it to look very neat. So the next one is padding. Padding is, I just want to give space, internal space of 10 PS. Okay, you can see how the padding brought it out. So you can see that there is now allowance between the contents and the borderline, and it makes it to what? To look more presentable. These are the things we need to Then the next one is cursor. You will notice that if user click on this, it's not showing that this is a clickable text. It's not showing that. So you need to show us that hand so that we know that, oh, this is not just a plain text, this is a clickable object. So how do we communicate that where it did not show by itself? We say we use cursor and then we pass what point as a value. If you go back now, you see that we now have the hand on it. Please let me get a response if you are following. I hope you are still following.
Yes, sir.
Okay. So now the next thing is we want to add some hover effect, which is totally optional. Maybe when somebody tap on this, there should be another display. That is a way of making it interactive. So we say what? Adding hover effect. So you cannot say because you are creating an application, you will not style it. Because if you don't style it, if it doesn't look nice, even if you add all those your JavaScript action, it's not going to make sense. That is why we are taking this aspect first before we bring in the JavaScript as the final language that will be used on this particular app development. So the hover effects, I'm leaving the text color the way it is, it's just the background that I will add little effect on when the user hovers on the button. That is what we call hover effect, when the user. So this is the actual effect. When they get to the website page, this is how they are going to meet it. So you are saying that you want it to be a little bit dynamic, that if somebody take a further step to touch this, not clicking, that the background should be darker or it should be lighter. So adding hover effect, the syntax is that we call the same button and then we add column and then we say hover. It's part of what we have treated before. So I will say my hover effect is just the background. You can choose to add other effect, but I just want to work with background and I'm giving dark green. I'm giving dark green. I don't want it to be too different from what it is. So when they hover, you see it. So you can decide to use a different color entirely. So now that brings us to, so I'm leaving the rest for you to work on. The name of the product, which is H1. These are the product's prices. If you want to also modify them, you can identify their structure. Like you can just say, you can class, you can decide to talk to this one. That is your choice. I don't want to waste time on that first. So you can do other styling. You can call your P tag. You can call your H3 and talk to the product name themselves. So here I can say when I'm done, okay, let me just put the real product now. So let's say BTU. So here is, let's say computer. Let's say here is computer. So if I go to this, so you can add the real product name and also define their color if you want. So, but I am not prioritizing that. The only thing I could do right now to have a better presentation is to move the whole of this to the center of the page since we do not have too many products. So if you go to the CSS, you know the container that is wrapping all of them, which is products. So this is where you should add it. You just add the alt margin. That is a div. That is a div with 100% width. So the first thing you are going to do, you are going to reduce the width from 100% so that it can move to like, let's say 85%. 85%. So if I go back to the front end, that width is already assigned. The only thing is that we are not seeing the border. If we want to see it, we just activate a temporary border just for us to measure the width. So I can say solid. I can just say what? Red. Just for us to know that the width was actually adjusted. So you can see it that is no longer 100%. So now that I've confirmed this, the next step is for me to just float everything to the center. So I will just use, since it's a block element, I will use margin and then use what? Auto. That will automatically centralize it. So I can now turn off my border line. I don't need it. I only use it to check if I was able to adjust the margin. So somehow this is not, but though because of the screen landscape. So let's assume if it's on mobile, it's going to be at the center. So it's the resolution or the landscape of my laptop that makes it to look as if it's not at the center. Okay, so I need to also move the store. I need to also move the store. So for me to do that, I will have to talk to it. Let me just use inline. This is just one style. Remember, inline, you need to add style. I need to say test align. Then I will just take it to the center. Okay. So let's leave it like this. This button or taking the button is inside because we are talking to this. So we need to also we need to also move some of these things. That is the button. If we want to, we need to also move it. But let me just go back to, let me just complete the JavaScript, but that is where the main work is. So you can always come back to style all this. Now, our JavaScript, like we have already programmed, that is going to be external JavaScript. Okay, yes, external JavaScript. So I already created a file. So I need to link it also. Remember, linking our JavaScript, we have to bring it to what? To before the closing of the body, just like I've done now. But this name is not the new name I use. So I will have to change it to, app, because currently my JavaScript file is app.js. So which means that I've connected it here. So I can now begin to write my JavaScript. Now, some of the classes we had, we are going to see how we are going to apply some of those display. Remember, we talked about JavaScript output method. We also talk about JavaScript what? DOM, that is document object modeling, or manipulation, where I told us that it's just a technique that is used to grab HTML elements in JavaScript, just like we did in CSS right now. You see how we're able to grab a container with a class name product. So that is like HTML what? Modeling in CSS. So while we are in JavaScript, since the file are separated, we need to also use any of those methods to select or to grab HTML element and store them in JavaScript so that we can program the action on them directly. So the first element we would like to drag or capture, which we need some actions on, is the cat. Right? The cat, the auto cat. Remember that we gave it a class name. And since we gave it a class name, we are going to talk to it the way we spoke to it in CSS. So let me go to the code section so that I understand what we are saying. The first element I want to grab is this button, because I want it to do something when the user click on it. I want to do something. Once they click on it, this amount that is showing 0 should change to what? 10 or 10 US dollar. If the person now click here again, it will update from 10 plus what? 20. So we need some action on that button. So the first thing is that we have to grab that button and speak on it. So how do we grab it? Now we are going to do something like this. So from here, the first thing we are going to do, we are going to create a variable that will hold it for us in JavaScript. So we say let let button equals to let button. Let button, let me put buttons, equals to, because it's not just one. Let button equals to document let button document dot query selector all, because that particular button, they are attached to multiple products. So we are not programming it separately for each of the products. We are simply saying that what? Once you any of the button that is clicked, this JavaScript code shows that on it. That is why we are using query selector. So we just type what? Query selector. If you are grabbing only one, we use query selector. But if you are grabbing all, you use query selector all. So this is the one I am using. So inside it, what do I want to grab? What do I want to grab? Now, what I want to grab here is the class name of that button, which is this. So this is what I want to grab. So I'll just copy it to avoid graphical error. Now, being a class name, we need to wrap it in a string. We need to acknowledge that what is a string. But being a class name, using the same CSS principle, we have to put dots before we paste it. We have to put dots because this particular query selector is a method that look exactly the way CSS work, where you ID an element to start with hash, where you class an element to start with dots. All right, so it works exactly the way CSS work. Then after this, you end it here. So what this line of code has done is to simply go to the what? To the HTML and capture what? Any button with the class what? Add to cart, which means it can capture this, it can capture this. That is why if you have added all the product button, they should have unique class names so that you don't write the code separately. I hope you are following.
Yes, sir.
Okay, so now the next thing we are going to do, we have grabbed that element. Now we want to grab what? The ID. If you look at this element, we gave it what? An ID as well. Where is it? We gave an ID. I'm looking at where we have our ID, cats. I think it was a table. Yeah, we have to also grab this one. Why? Because that one touching affects the reaction happens here. This is what we are saying. When somebody click here, then the action here will influence this. So which means that we have just grabbed this button. Now we also, right now, these buttons exist in JavaScript. Now we need to also grab this because something will happen when somebody click here. So that is why the next one we have to grab the next button before we start programming the action. So grabbing that one, we are going to say also, let cat equals to document dot. Now we are going to use get element by ID, not query selector, because it's just one. Now, what is the class? What is the ID element? The ID element is cat. It's cat, just like I just showed you now. It's cat. Right? So we have grabbed that one also, and we have stored it in JavaScript. What we are doing right now, those elements that we will be talking to, we are first of all acknowledging them. We are first of all acknowledging them in JavaScript, so that we don't have to be contacting them from HTML. That's what we are doing now. So you have stored the first one here, you have stored the second one. That is the order. You must store them in JavaScript. Now, the next thing now is that those elements, Now we want to display the total. Once they click, we want to display the total. Like I showed us here, we want to display this amount here as the total. So we want to grab this particular total item. So now, how do we do that? So we also say we want to say what? We also say let total display. Let total display. Let total display. Let total display. Let the total display equals to total display equals to document dot. Let's check how we program it in HTML. Is it ID? Total display. Look at it here. Total display. Yes, it has an ID called what? Total. So that is why you must always check how you label the elements. So total display is by ID. So which means that I will say document dot get ID to grab that element. And then, as usual, what is the ID? Total. You go back and check. Hope you do not use capital letter. This is it. So now, the next thing is we have grabbed that one. Now we can end it. So what we have done so far, we have captured all the elements involved, and we have stored them in JavaScript. Now we want to start looping across them. So let me use comments here. Now loop through, remember under control structure in JavaScript, we have talked about all those if statement, loop. So we are going to see the action here. So all buttons, loop all buttons. That is what apply the function on all the buttons that we have captured here, because we have brought the button and they are now currently stored in what? Button. So how do we say that? We will now say button. You see the essence of. So which means that we are talking to this one now. Button dot for each. For each is the type of loop. For each, where you want to iterate across multiple objects. For each. That is what this function should be added or should be acknowledged on each. For each. For each is a function, is a loop function. Now, we are going to write a function inside it. Remember the syntax of declaring function. You have to what? Call the function keyword. What are you looping? You are looping button. You are looping button. So that is what you are looping. Now, it's a function, so you have to complete it by writing your parenthesis bracket. Right? So buttons dot for each function button this particular bracket that will open. This is not where it should open. That's why you notice. So this is where it should open, the one for this. So which means that the one for this one here, should have been closed here. Should have been closed somewhere here. And then probably move it down together with this so that it will make more sense. So you can now read. I hope we get it. This one closing here. This one closing here. I don't need this anymore. Okay. So this one comes here. You need to make sure that the alignment is good. Okay. So just make sure you get the syntax. We open this first for each bracket, and then we expanded it here. Then we created a function keyword. We passed in button as what? Argument or parameter. And then inside that function, so which means that this calling bracket is owned by this function, not by the for each. That is what we have just communicated here. I hope you are following. Let me get a response before I proceed.
Yes, sir.
Okay.
Yes,
So,
sir.
okay, no, okay. Now, we talk about add event listener. Remember, there was a function, add event listener. All right? And that is exactly what we are targeting, how we can use it to create this add event listener. Remember that that was the function we use in triggering an action when the user click. So we are going to bring it here. So we'll simply say button. We'll say button dot add event listener. Because when they click, an action will be performed. Add event listener. So remember when we treated event listener, we talked about the event and the function. So the event is by clicking. So what will trigger the action is when they click. You read your notes, we have treated this, so we are simply just applying it. So we'll call function, all right? So we'll just call function, and this function is anonymous function like I told us, function without a name. Then here immediately we have another calling bracket, that is function inside function. So what will happen when the user click? So what will happen when the user click will be let's name. Unfortunately, we will not be able to finish it. I'll stop somewhere. Let name equals to button. Let name equals to button dot get attributes. Remember, that's why we added attributes. Get attributes. Come in. Okay, so I'll say get attribute. Now, why are we getting? Let me just write it. I will show you where we are getting this from. It's part of what we get attributes. Now, if you go back to your code, look at it here. This is what you want to get now. Get attributes. Which element are we talking to now? Get attributes. Data name. You can see it here. Get attribute data name. This is how we are capturing the products. This is the one for product name. This is the one for product price. So that is what we want to acknowledge. So now, if we come here and say get attribute data is the name of that product you are capturing a name. So we'll do it for price also. So once you are done with this, then while you are still inside this, so you end this one here. While you are still inside this, you do another one again. Let price, because now I want to get the price with the same attribute with this. I want to get the price with this. We have got to the name with this. So now get the price. Let the price be equals to pass. Is a function, which means that is an integer, pass integer, because it's number. Remember, we talked about that. Then pass integer, you open a bracket, and then you now call the button call a button dot get attribute before I paste what I copy. Get attributes, and then I'm going to say, open the bracket. I think I copied it before, price. That is what we are capturing. So we'll also end this one here. Where did I end the first one? Okay, need to make sure that. So I think this is the last one. So the next thing is that we need to, let me see if I have. Okay, price. So I need to end this one here. Yeah, because I opened two different brackets. Okay, this one, and the one of get attribute. That's why we are having two closing brackets instead of one. Okay, so we are going to stop here. So I have somewhere I want to rush to. So we are going to stop here. We just have few code remaining to end this. You just have few codes remaining to end it so that to start displaying properly. However, before the next class on Thursday morning, I want you to be able to update. So if you are taking snap the code, because you may not get the video immediately. Please snap the code. When you actually let me know.
Let me snap the style.
Okay. Okay, the CSS, right?
Mm.
Okay. Let me start from the top.
Let me see the ending.
You have written the HTML before now.
I couldn't find my work. Maybe in case I couldn't find it later.
Okay,
The
I
app
check.
does HTML.
Okay, I check now. Let me go up. Okay.
Okay.
I check.
So,
Yeah.
that's dollar sign. If you want to change it to Naira, what will you do?
You type N now. You type letter N. That is what you
Okay,
do.
okay. Instead of dollar sign.
Yes, yes, yes.
Okay.
Have you finished snapping so that I can?
Yes, sir.
Okay. All right. Please make sure that you do it before the next class so that I will just continue from here.
Okay.